Hey guys, tonight we begin with something dazzling, dramatic, and absolutely exhausting, just perfect for bedtime. You're standing on Mount Olympus, swaddled in a blinding blanket of white clouds. The air hums with the scent of cedar and static, because there's always thunder rumbling somewhere nearby. The gods live here, but not in peaceful harmony. No! It's more like one of those eternally uncomfortable family reunions that never ends and comes with lightning bolts. Hera sits on her throne, carved from golden myrtle wood, wearing a crown that doesn't just sparkle, it radiates divine judgment. She's not just a queen of the gods. She's a patroness of marriage, women, and long, frosty silences in the divine dining room. You can practically hear her sigh as she narrows her eyes across the Olympian courtyard, surveying everything, especially him. Zeus is off somewhere, probably transforming himself into a swan or a shower of gold. Again, you already know where this is going. Hera knows too, and in the middle of this marital Cold War, a peacock, strutting, fluffing, swaying those iridescent tail feathers with the calm confidence of a bird that's seen far too much and spoken too little. That peacock, dear listener, has a backstory. It is more than just her favorite accessory. It is her tribute, her weaponized mourning, her shimmering passive aggression with wings. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this little sleep train travels. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past Hera's throne. The marble under your feet is cold and eternal. It doesn't creak or shift like human floors. It simply exists, perfect, unweathered, and somehow smug. Columns stretch into a sky, so blue it looks painted. The wind here whispers, and sometimes it sounds like gossip. You don't want to get too close to any of the statues. They have eyes. Real ones? Maybe. This is Olympus. Nothing is metaphorical for long. Hera doesn't look at you, but she knows you're there. She always knows. You get the distinct impression that if you so much as think a spicy thought, she'll personally appear to correct you, with consequences. And standing silently behind her, half in shadow, half in that golden post-thunderstorm glow, is the peacock, not just any bird. This one is unnaturally still, and its tail is folded, yet even that still hints an opulence beyond mere feathers. Their eyes, hundreds of them, round, piercing, unblinking, but the peacock doesn't seem to mind. Back in the mortal world, in actual biological terms, peacocks use those eye spots to flirt. But on Olympus, where metaphor and reality hold hands, those eyes belong to someone else. They were earned, or taken, depending on who's telling the story. And like everything involving gods, the peacock's feathers are both beautiful and a little bit tragic. You hear a murmur, maybe from Hera, maybe from the peacock. It's hard to tell. They all close in time. The voice says, that doesn't help. The court of Olympus continues its quiet drama. Apollo is somewhere in the background playing a lyre that may or may not be tuned. Dionysus is offering ambrosia to a goat. Hermes is probably stealing that goat. And somewhere far below, mortals are going about their silly little mortal problems. War, taxes, sandals that never quite fit. But Hera, she watches. That's her thing. Watching, waiting, planning. Some say she's just jealous. Others say she's the only one playing the long game in a pantheon full of impulsive divas. Historians still argue whether Hera was merely reactive, a goddess shaped by Zeus' serial monogamy failings, or whether she had her own divine agenda long before their mythical marriage. Either way, she's not bored. She's tracking every move, yours, mine, Zeus's. And when she catches a whiff of deception, she doesn't explode, not immediately. She plans. She remembers. She turns memories into symbols. And feathers. That peacock didn't always shimmer like that. Once upon a myth, it was just another divine bird. Glorious, yes, but no eyes. No legacy. Then came Argus, and a girl named Io. But we'll get to them soon enough. For now, you just watch the peacock, and it watches back with all those borrowed eyes, blinking in silent judgment. You notice something. Every time Hera exhales, a breeze flicks across the peacock's feathers, making the eyes ripple like ripples in a pond. It's mesmerizing, hypnotic even. One eye closes, then another, then another. It's not a real sleep pattern, just something hauntingly close. You don't know why you're counting them. Maybe it's instinct. Maybe it's myth. Olympus begins to fade a little. The light shifts. You feel time uncoil, slow and sticky, like honey in winter. Everything here is both eternal and boring. Honestly, it's a perfect place to nap, except the gossip would wake you up. At some point, you sit on a marble bench that wasn't there before. It's surprisingly warm. Beside you is a scroll, partially unrolled, covered in tiny golden script. You try to read it, but the letters rearrange themselves when you blink. So, yeah, classic mythological bureaucracy. Probably Hera's receipts. You set it down. Somewhere behind you, thunder growls. Not close, not loud. Just enough to remind you that Zeus is nearby and probably doing something regrettable. Hera's grip tightens on the armrest of her throne. The peacock's tail flutters again. More eyes open. And there it is. You finally notice it. Not the feathers. Not the judgment. But the strange stillness of history when it's about to repeat itself. Hera stands, and when she does, the entire hall straightens. Even the lazy wind pauses. She's noticed something. Not you. Someone else. A familiar lie, freshly baked. The air on Olympus curdles, like milk left in a sunbeam. Hera's gaze fixes on the horizon, though it's not a physical one. Not the rolling clouds or the curve of the sky. No, she's watching the mortal plane. Somewhere far below, and yet immediately accessible if she so chooses, is another scene unfolding. Familiar, annoying, involving Zeus. Again, you follow her gaze, although you can't quite see what she sees. But Hera doesn't need you to see it. She already knows what's going on. He's shape-shifted. Again, probably into a bull, or a cloud, or, on especially imaginative Tuesdays, a particularly seductive oak tree. It doesn't even surprise her anymore. At this point, she probably keeps a bingo card for Zeus's disguises. And tonight, she stamps the space mark cow-related disaster. This is where Io comes in. Poor Io, a priestess of Hera, loyal and luminous. Her skin supposedly glowed like moonlight on milk, which to Zeus basically meant challenge accepted. The king of the gods set his unblinking eye on her, and because personal boundaries are optional in Olympus, he made his move. And when Hera found out, she did what every betrayed goddess of marriage does. She turned the innocent mortal girl into a cow. Yes, a literal cow. Smooth move, right? Historians still argue whether Hera's act was punishment or protection, whether she was cruel to Io, or whether she was saving her from Zeus's creepily persistent advances by removing her human appeal. Either way, Cow Io had a tough time. She wandered the earth, lowing pitifully, tormented by a gadfly Hera had thoughtfully added to her situation. Because nothing says divine discipline like an insect that won't quit. Now, here's the thing. Hera didn't just let Io wander. She needed someone to watch her, to make sure Zeus didn't sneak in with a bucket of alfalfa and another apology. And that's where Argus comes in. Argus Panoptes. His last name literally means all-seeing, and it's not metaphorical. He had 100 eyes, all over. Face, arms, elbows, probably even kneecaps. Honestly, it's a logistical nightmare trying to picture it. But functionally, ideal security guard. While some eyes slept, others stayed awake. No naps, no Netflix, just endless, blinking vigilance. You imagine him now, standing beside Cow Io in some muddy meadow, dressed in bronze armor that squeaks when he moves. One eye slowly shuts while another pops open. He looks bored but focused. This is the job. Hera trusted him. Or maybe she just liked that he literally couldn't look away. But Zeus? He hates being thwarted, especially when it comes to one of his divine dalliances. So he sent Hermes, the trickster, the smooth talker, the god with winged sandals and zero chill. His mission? Take out Argus. Not in the dramatic, lightning sword kind of way. That would have drawn too much attention. No, Hermes uses boredom. And music, you picture it now. Hermes saunters into the meadow with a lyre slung casually over his shoulder, probably wearing an outfit that says, "I may rob you, but you'll enjoy it." He chats with Argus, plays a tune, tells a story, plays another tune, another story, and then another, and then another. Some about cows, some about gods, some about cows that are secretly gods. Argus starts nodding off, just one eye at a time, but Hermes is relentless. His voice weaves through the grass like a lullaby laced with anesthetic. The music slows. A breeze carries the last note like a feather. And finally, all 100 eyes close. It's the godly equivalent of a full system shutdown. One blink too many. That's when Hermes strikes. Now, the myths disagree on what Hermes does next. Some say he kills Argus instantly, clean and efficient. Others say it was a quieter end, a release from duty. There's even a fringe theory that Argus didn't die at all, but was absorbed into the Peacock on a spiritual level, which sounds deeply poetic, and probably has its own candle line on Etsy. What is clear is this: Hera is furious, not theatrically, not loudly, but coldly, deeply, the kind of fury that simmers, so low it fogs and mirrors. Argus, her faithful watcher, has fallen. Her honor's been dented. And Io, she's off, hoofing across Europe like an unwilling contestant in the divine version of The Amazing Race. Cow edition. But Hera, ever the strategist, does something strange, something quiet. She doesn't punish Hermes. She doesn't scream at Zeus. Instead, she approaches the Peacock. You remember that still bird from before, the one that stood by her throne? That's when it changes. Hera gently lifts Argus's spirit, or maybe just a memory of his eyes, and presses into the feathers of her sacred bird. The eyes take root. One by one, they shimmer into place on the tail, each one an echo of Argus's watchfulness, immortalized in vanity, camouflaged in beauty. You can almost hear Hera whisper, "Let them always see." From then on, the Peacock becomes more than a mascot. It's a mobile monument. A pet, yes, but also a message. I see everything, even when I don't. Mainstream scholars nod at this myth, connecting it with Hera's association with eyes, vigilance, and dignity. But there are odd interpretations, too. One obscure fragment suggests the eyes were meant to trap dreams, that Hera, patron of marriage, could peer into lovers' thoughts through the peacock's plumage. Imagine your wedding night dreams being quietly reviewed by a bedazzled bird. Ancient Greece, folks, back on Olympus, Hera smooths the peacock's feathers with a hand that could crush stars. The tail rustles. The eyes blink. You think one of them winks at you. It's hard to say. And Hera, regal and composed, doesn't speak. She doesn't have to. The symbolism speaks for her. Zeus knows it. Everyone knows it. Don't mess with the queen. She'll turn your security guard into wallpaper, and you'll still look tacky by comparison. The breeze across Olympus changes direction, as if even the wind knows it's time to move on from that particularly eye-heavy incident. But Hera, never one to forgive betrayal or the lesson within it, lets her hand fall away from the peacock's jeweled tail. Those eyes, once belonging to Argus Panoptes, remain open even in sleep. A reminder, a warning, a rather flamboyant surveillance system. You trail behind her, sandals whispering across marble. Around you, immortality stretches like an uncomfortable robe, beautiful, heavy, and filled with consequences. The halls are quiet for now. No lightning, no lyre music, just Hera's steady presence as she continues down a corridor carved with stories. Murals and bas-reliefs etched into white stone. Weddings, births, wars, and betrayals. So many betrayals. Hera, after all, has had practice. Io was hardly the first, nor the last. The thing about being a goddess of marriage is that you're permanently caught in the most high-profile, least functional relationship in mythology. Zeus doesn't stop, and Hera doesn't forgive. Not really. What she does is adapt, adjust, evolve her strategies. You pause in front of one particularly dramatic carving, a woman with a crown of snakes, flanked by lions, glaring up a thundercloud with unmistakable side-eye. You wonder if that's supposed to be Hera, or just another version of her. Her iconography changes depending on the city-state. After all, in Samos, she's maternal. In Argos, regal and distant. In older Mycenaean echoes, she's something even stranger, wilder, less Olympic committee, and more ancient, pre-Greek storm goddess who occasionally burns down settlements. Historians still argue whether Hera evolved from a pre-Hellenic Earth Mother figure or whether she was imported wholesale into the pantheon just to balance out Zeus's testosterone. Either way, she's not static. She's layered, complex, and, let's be honest, a little terrifying. Which is probably why she collects sacred animals, like some people collect passive-aggressive coffee mugs. There's the cow, yes, still symbolic, even after the Io incident. The lion, the cuckoo, and of course, the peacock. But tonight, you're thinking about Argus. You imagine his 100 eyes now scattered in feathers, watching without judgment, and wonder how many other mortals or semi-mortals met their end for simply catching Zeus's attention. It's a long list, longer than the Iliad, and most of them are women, which Hera never forgets. Here's the twist, though. Hera rarely punishes Zeus directly. It's always the women, or the children, or the families of the women. The divine equivalent of blaming the server, because the chef keeps burning the steak. You might judge her for that, but think about the rules she's bound by. Olympus runs on reputation, and Hera's brand is unshakable dignity. She can't chase Zeus around with a rolling pin. So she wields shame, symbolism, and serpentine logic. She builds her vengeance like a political campaign. Slow, effective, and terrifyingly well accessorized. Take the story of Callisto, a nymph loyal to Artemis, virgin huntress, bowstring enthusiast. Zeus, apparently mistaking no for yes again, seduces her, sometimes by disguise, sometimes by deception. Either way, Callisto ends up pregnant, which is sort of a giveaway. Hera, naturally, is not pleased. She doesn't smite Zeus. She doesn't even confront him. She turns Callisto into a bear. A bear, not a metaphor. An actual clawed, growling bear. Because nothing says you made poor life choices like being transformed into a woodland hazard. Callisto wanders a forest, trying to avoid hunters, including, awkwardly, her own son. Later, Zeus tries to clean up the mess by placing both of them in the sky as constellations. Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. Classic move. Cosmic relocation instead of apology. But Hera, she goes one step further. She asks Oceanus and Tethys, the deities of the sea, to never let those constellations touch the ocean horizon, which is why, according to myth, those stars never dip below it. Petty? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. You glance up. Even Olympus has stars above it. And somewhere in that celestial scatter is a bear mother and her child, forever circling the heavens, never bathing in the sea. And so Hera walks, and watches, and remembers. Behind her, the peacock swishes its tail. The eye spots glitter faintly, catching moonlight that hasn't even happened yet. You wonder if Argus would be proud, or just confused, to find himself part of an angry bird's elaborate symbolism. You wonder if he saw it coming. But there's no time to linger. Hera has temples to tend to, shrines to bless, marriages to protect, or punish. She steps through a cloud that smells faintly of rose water and electricity. You follow, because at this point, what else are you going to do? Go back to the meadow and apologize to the cow? No, thank you. You arrive at a sanctuary, one of Hera's favorites. It's empty, silent, built by mortals but perfected by divine presence. The pillars are wrapped with ribbons. The altar glows faintly with leftover prayers. And there, tucked into a niche, is a statue of Hera, eyes forward, hand raised, crown impeccable. The peacock circles her feet. The tail eyes blink once, in unison, and that's when you notice something odd. The mural on the far wall, unusual for a sacred space, shows Hermes lulling Argus to sleep, not as a villain, not even as a trickster, but as an artist, peaceful, serene, almost kind. It makes you wonder, did Hera really hold a grudge? Or did she understand the poetry of it all? That the watchman's eyes would become her own. That vigilance never truly dies, but changes shape, adapts. That's what Hera does, again and again. And somewhere, just maybe, Argus still sees. You blink and the temple shimmers, just slightly, like warm air over stone. Hera is gone for now, her sandals no longer echoing across marble. But the scent of her remains jasmine, olive oil, maybe just a hint of thundercloud, which you try not to overanalyze. The peacock stays behind, fanning out its magnificent tail before slowly folding in again, like a book being closed without a bookmark. You step back from the statue, careful not to disturb the dustless floor. There's a weight here, one that comes from centuries of incense and whispered prayers, of hopeful brides and desperate mothers leaving offerings with trembling hands. Hera, for all her complexity, is consistent in one thing. People come to her when they want something to last. A marriage, a bloodline, a legacy. And that brings you to another thread in the long, tangled mythological scarf Hera wears. Her relationship with Heracles. Yes, that Heracles. The demigod strongman with the worst luck and the most muscles per moral lesson. Hera and Heracles have what scholars would generously call a challenging dynamic. You already know the setup. Zeus being Zeus. False for Alcmene, a mortal queen. He disguises himself as her husband. There's an evening. 9 months later, Heracles is born. And Hera? Oh, Hera is livid. Historians still argue whether her rage was more about the betrayal or the specific insult of the deception. Either way, it gets biblical fast. Except, Greek. She tries to prevent his birth. She sends witches to delay labor. She manipulates the timing so that another baby, Eurystheus, is born first and gets the throne. And when that doesn't do the trick, she sends 2 snakes to kill Heracles in his crib. Spoiler, he strangles them. Tiny baby fists of fury. Honestly, that should have been the end of it. You try to murder someone, they murder your snakes. You call it even. But no, Hera plays a long game. She haunts Heracles. Not directly, of course. Hera doesn't throw chairs. She pulls strings. She manipulates events. When Heracles grows up, she drives him mad. So mad, in fact, that he kills his wife and children. It's a tragedy so grim. Even the chorus in your mind goes silent. To atone, he takes on 12 labors, each more absurd than the last. Slay the Nemean lion. Clean the Augean stables. Fetch Cerberus from the underworld like it's a golden retriever. And while these labors are supposed to purify him, Hera keeps upping the difficulty, like she's designing a mythical obstacle course while sipping ambrosia through a bendy straw. One quirky tidbit: despite her hatred, it's Hera's own sacred animal, the cow, that ends up helping Heracles in his 10th labor. He has to steal the cattle of Geryon, a monstrous 3-bodied dude living way out in what might be modern Spain. After slaying Geryon, Heracles herds the cattle back home, but not before building some pillars along the way. The Pillars of Heracles? Now known as the Rock of Gibraltar? Yeah, that guy really needed a scrapbook. But still, Hera's shadow follows him. You'd think that after his apotheosis, his ascension to Olympus, she'd finally call a truce. And she does, sort of. Once he's a full god, Hera agrees to reconcile. She even lets Heracles marry her daughter, Hebe, the goddess of youth, which makes her both mother-in-law and former tormentor. Thanksgiving dinners must be a real blast. You wander out of the temple, mind still stuck on those odd contradictions. Hera, who punishes infidelity but stays married to its poster child. Hera, who torments Heracles but eventually accepts him into the family. Hera, who grieves Argus and repurposes him into fashion. It's almost like her mythology is one long stretch of divine multitasking, balancing cosmic vengeance, ceremonial duties, and high-maintenance hair accessories. Outside, the landscape has shifted again. You're no longer in shining Olympus or perfumed sanctuaries. Now you're walking down a dusty hillside, towards a town whose name you've already forgotten. The kind of place that burned offerings, but probably didn't get personal thank you notes from the gods. The people here know Hera differently. To them, She's not the queen on the throne. She's the figure in the corner of the hearth, watching quietly as food is shared and promises are made. They leave her bits of bread and drops of wine, sometimes a comb. Once, in what must have been an extremely niche situation, a chicken wearing a tiny bronze necklace. You try not to ask questions. In one small, weather-worn shrine, there's a crumbling fresco of Hera seated beside a cow, not a peacock in sight, which raises a question. Did the whole peacock-eye situation even originate in these towns? Or was that a later addition, layered on by poets and artists who needed a flashy symbol for her vigilance? Scholars still argue whether the peacock itself was originally associated with Hera, or if it became her bird only after the Argus myth was backfilled to make narrative sense, which is very on-brand for Greek mythology. Write the ending first, then retcon the beginning. But it doesn't matter, not really. Myths aren't about consistency. They're about meaning. You feel that now, watching a rooster crow at nothing in particular, while a goat stares at you like it knows you're browsing history. You sit on a stone ledge, feeling the warmth from the sun, and imagine Hera sitting here, too. Not furious, not royal, just watching, listening, maybe even laughing once, before remembering she's not supposed to. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't always like this. Maybe the 100-eyed feathers didn't start as trophies of grief, but as something gentler, a symbol of endless awareness, of seeing everyone, every moment, of never being surprised again. Because when you've been betrayed enough times, surprise isn't charming anymore. It's dangerous. So you become a watcher. You surround yourself with watchers. You put eyes in your jewelry and symbols in your temples and metaphors in your birds. And then you hope that's enough. You dust your palms off and stand, the breeze shifting. Somewhere above, you swear you hear wings beating in slow motion, a faint shimmer. And there it is, the flicker of a tail in the sky, feathers like stained glass, a constellation you can't quite name. The peacock watches, and Hera remembers. You press your palms to the soft, sun-warmed grass and feel 1,000 feathered eyes blink in unison. The peacocks drift further into garden, preening under the afternoon light. If afternoon even means anything here. Time hums sideways in myth. You're still seated beneath that fig tree, the one with sticky bark and overripe fruit, as Hera walks past and is shimmering down the color storm clouds trimmed in gold. Her shoulders are square, her steps deliberate. She's already thinking ahead. Because if you think the story of Io, Argus, and the peacock's tale is a tidy conclusion, you're adorably mistaken. After all, what's grief without follow-up revenge? Zeus, having rescued Io from her bovine prison, now finds himself in the marital equivalent of the world's longest silent treatment. Hera's not yelling. No lightning bolts. Just the calm, strategic planning of a woman who already owns your house and knows where you sleep. So Hera doesn't retaliate directly, not immediately. She lets her symbol, the peacock, do the brooding for her. It struts around Olympus, a glittering reminder that she remembers. That every time someone praises Zeus, she's watching. That loyalty, once broken, leaves traces. Mainstream historical fact? Peacocks weren't native to Greece. They came from India and Persia, traded, gifted, and paraded into noble households like walking jewelry. By the classical period, they were exotic status symbols. Keeping a peacock was a subtle way of saying, yes, my dinner parties are better than yours. Quirky tidbit. There's a record from a Roman banquet centuries later where a host serves roasted peacock tongues on gilded plates. It was considered the height of culinary elegance, or possibly indigestion. Historians still argue whether the Romans genuinely enjoyed eating peacocks, or just showing off in the world's earliest influencer culture. But for Hera, the bird isn't about wealth, it's about legacy. You follow her now through a hallway lined with urns, frescoes, and lingering echoes. The gods don't clean up after themselves, clearly. A breeze carries a scent of myrrh and olive oil, like someone overdid it on divine moisturizer. She stops before a statue herself, of course, and studies it with pursed lips. Even goddesses aren't immune to bad likenesses. You almost hear her mutter, "My chin doesn't look like that." Then, without looking back, she speaks, not to you but to history. They always blame me for the wrath. And she's right. Hera gets branded as a jealous wife, the shrew, the one who punishes innocent mortals for her husband's indiscretions. Io, Semele, Leto, Echo. The list goes on like a divine HR complaint log. But pause for a moment. What would you do if your immortal spouse turned into animals just to cheat on you? Exactly. Hera's not just a goddess. She's a mythic mirror of wounded dignity, channeling every act of betrayal into eternal consequences. When she couldn't punish Zeus, she punished the aftermath, his lovers, his offspring, his schemes. You could argue it's unjust. You could also argue it's the only form of control she had. Scholars still debate whether Hera's wrath was originally her defining trait, or whether it evolved over time as myths were reshaped by patriarchal storytelling. Was she always a vengeful wife, or was that just what made for better cautionary tales? Maybe she was once more regal, more complex, a sovereign queen rather than a scorned partner. Back beneath the fig tree, a feather flutters into your lap. You run your fingers along the edge, soft, iridescent, marked with that iconic eye. It watches nothing, but somehow knows everything, like a ghost of loyalty, or maybe a memo to never trust your boss when he says, "It's just a business trip." You pluck another fig and consider how long grief can last when you're immortal. A day? A century? Until poets stop reciting your story? Hera returns to her throne, her bird at her side. She leans back, imperious, and allows herself one brief, satisfied exhale. You close your eyes again. Then the soft hum of feathers, olives, and peacock steps lull you into the next chapter, where beauty meets revenge in a garden of endless symbolism. The marble under your feet now shifts. You're no longer in Hera's garden, but drifting through Olympus itself, a palace so vast that even the echoes take coffee breaks. The halls are lined with columns that could double as skyscrapers, and each corner seems to whisper a story, a scandal, or a hymn depending on the mood. You wander into a room trimmed in bronze, the ceiling painted with constellations in various stages of disrepair, because even gods get distracted mid-project. You're not entirely sure how long you've been walking, but your legs haven't tired, and your mind drifts in that familiar fog of semi-sleep, semi-wonder. In the center of this room sits Hera's throne. It's not as flashy as Zeus's, not all lightning bolts and drama, but instead elegant, deliberate, silver-veined marble, carved arms shaped like lionesses, and at the top, unmistakably, a sculpted peacock plume with those familiar eyes. She sits there now, stately as always, examining an ivory tablet. She's reviewing grievances, divine and mortal alike. You notice a few are still written in cursive, so you know this must be serious. But your focus drifts to what's beside the throne. A desk. Yes, a goddess as a desk. And on it, objects of power, sentiment, and, in at least one case, petty triumph. You're not supposed to look, but you're not supposed to look. Mainstream fact. In ancient Greece, deities were often depicted with attributes, symbols or items closely tied to their stories. Zeus had his thunderbolt, Poseidon his trident. Athena came with an owl and a shield. But Hera had her peacock, and sometimes a scepter, yet in private depictions, frescoes, figurines, lost temple carvings, there are hints of other symbols, pomegranates, diadems, and curious scrolls. And here on the desk, you spy a small clay dish filled with pomegranate seeds. They glisten like tiny rubies, juicy with metaphor. Hera picks one up now and rolls it between her fingers, then places it back without eating it. It's not for nourishment. It's memory. Perhaps a nod to her connection to Persephone, whose abduction and seasonal imprisonment Hera never really approved of. Family politics among gods is basically an eternal Thanksgiving dinner, but with more hexes. And then, a fringe detail you weren't expecting. A tiny bronze mirror. It's no larger than your hand, polished to an obsessive shine. Ancient mirrors didn't reflect perfectly. They warped, shimmered, hinted at your soul more than your face. But this one, it's different. It reflects only eyes. Hundreds of them. When Hera gazes into it, it doesn't show her. It shows Argus's eyes, a private keepsake of loyalty and loss. You shiver, though not from cold. There's something deeply human about a goddess who collects mementos. Like the rest of us, she keeps small tokens of the people who mattered. whether they died for her or disappointed her. Imagine if your grandmother's keepsake box included a mirror full of haunted eyeballs. Same vibe, really. Scholars still argue whether these symbolic items, pomegranates, mirrors, peacock feathers, originated in oral tradition or were added by artists and playwrights for dramatic flair. Some believe Hera evolved from a broader mother goddess archetype, perhaps even predating Olympian religion altogether. Others argue she was always a goddess of marriage and power, shaped from the beginning by male insecurities and stormy monogamy. Hera sets down her mirror and unrolls a scroll. You catch glimpses, names, places, complaints written in elaborate script. One phrase stands out: the mortal girl who dared to wear gold sandals in the sacred grove. You wonder what happened to her. Maybe she's a constellation now. Or a bush. At the edge of the desk sits a delicate cage made of woven gold. Empty, but the latch is open. You don't ask what it once held. Outside the palace, thunder grumbles softly. Zeus trying to get Hera's attention, no doubt. He probably sent another thundercloud bouquet or a sky-written apology. She doesn't flinch. She's already seen the forecast. You find yourself leaning against a pillar, drowsy and full of myth. The marble is cool against your cheek. You followed Hera from wrath to grief, from feathers to files. She is not a goddess who forgets. She is a goddess who files, organizes, archives. She picks up a stylus, dips it in ink, and writes something on a scroll. Then, slowly, without drama, she places a single peacock feather across the page. It's not an exclamation point. It's a period. The conversation, it seems, is over for now. You push off the pillar, half floating, half walking, guided by the soft rustled peacock feathers echoing behind you. The throne room fades, and with it, the mirror of eyes, the pomegranate sweetness, the empty cage that once held a lesson. Somewhere, another peacock cries, sharp, hollow, and beautiful. You don't turn back. You emerge in the palace through a side corridor framed in curling vines and low-hanging lamps that flicker with no clear source of flame. Each step echoes slightly, though you're not entirely sure on what. It's as if Olympus was built on mist and storytelling rather than stone and geometry. Ahead, a narrow bridge appears, woven from golden threads, spanning across nothingness like a cobweb constructed by a particularly ambitious spider with an eye for drama. And across that bridge, a garden again, but not Hera's this time. This one is wilder, less controlled. Olive trees twist at odd angles, lemon blossoms scent the air, and lounging along a mossy bench is a familiar figure, Argus, or what's left of him, not in the grotesque horror movie sense. Don't worry, he's more memory than monster now. He sits upright, blank-faced, the eyes that once dotted his body, now feathered across the garden. In birds, in flowers, in shadows, Argus, the many-eyed guardian, turned into something gentler in death, a symbol scattered rather than buried. You sit beside him, and for a moment, the air is just still. Mainstream fact. Argus Panoptes was known as the all-seeing giant in some versions of myth. He had eyes all over his body. In others, just 100, only 100. Because apparently Greek mythology had to make everything sound like a sleep-deprived creative writing assignment. Argus was Hera's most trusted servant, and when he died, slain by Hermes under Zeus's orders, Hera mourned him deeply. To honor him, she took his many eyes and placed them into the tail of her favorite bird. Thus, the peacock became sacred, and Argus was never truly gone. Fringe tidbit? In some lesser-known versions, Argus's eyes were believed to have given him visions not just of the present, but of futures yet to come, like a divine security camera plus tarot reader. The myths don't dwell on that, but some scholars, mostly the kind who teach electives no one signs up for, suggest Argus may have had prophetic functions that got erased in later retellings. Or maybe it's just wishful thinking from people who also believe cats understand particle physics. You reach out, absently brushing your hand against a small flower with a feather-like center. It blinks. One slow, contented blink, then closes again. This garden is a mausoleum, but a peaceful one. You realize now why Hera spends time here when she's not at her desk. Because here, the memory of loyalty doesn't bite. It watches and occasionally purrs, depending on the bird. Argus finally speaks, his voice a low hum, like distant thunder mixed with an old cello string. She doesn't forget, he says, but she also forgives, eventually. You nod. You believe him. After all, he'd know. Scholars still argue whether Hera's memorialization of Argus is an act of compassion or control. Was she honoring him, or using his image to remind others of what happens to those who serve her and fall? Was the peacock a gift or a warning? You lean back, watching as a nearby peacock flares its tail in a lazy semicircle. The eyes glint in the light, sapphire, emerald, gold. Dozens of them, calm and unblinking. Suddenly, a small scroll floats past on the breeze. You grab it before it disappears into the foliage. The parchment is thin, the ink smudged. It reads, "Beauty is a form of justice." Maybe, or maybe it's just a way of not screaming. You let the scroll go, and it flutters upward, dissolving into glimmers as it ascends into the treetops. Everything here is soft, hushed, more whisper than word. Even the wind seems to tiptoe. Argus rises now, slowly, stretching in a way that seems to echo the unfurling of those once watchful eyes. He nods to you once and disappears. Not with magic, but with the unceremonious fate of a dream that knows it's over. And now it's just you in the garden again. You run your fingers over a stone bench where Hera once sat. It's warm, still warm, like she left just moments ago. A single feather drifts down, landing on your shoulder. You don't brush it away. You rise, walk again toward the golden bridge, which now seems more threadbare, more memory than structure. And still it holds. The garden fades behind you. The sounds of peacocks, rustling leaves, and old myths settle back into silence. But the feeling remains. You aren't just walking through Olympus anymore. You're walking through legacy. You shift your weight on the moss-covered stone beneath you. A feather drifts down lazily from the fig tree's canopy. It's turquoise and iridescent, pulsing with a faint shimmer of memory. You let it land on your palm, half expecting it to blink. The garden around you fades slightly, and now you're walking through marble halls. Temples to Hera, yes, but also corridors of gossip and pride. Because after Argus's tragic demise and the fashioning of the first peacock tail pattern, Hera doesn't simply sit in divine stillness. She leans into symbolism. She flaunts it. Actually, if gods had Instagram, she'd post a boomerang of that peacock tail with a caption like, "Still watching? Hashtag never forget Argus." The mortal world, meanwhile, picks up on the vibes. Across the Aegean and beyond, cults devoted to Hera begin integrating peacocks into processions, sanctuaries, and street-level murals. In Argos, yes, that very real city with the suspiciously matching name, Hera becomes queen of worship. Her temples are outshined even Zeus's in splendor. There's one with a roof so opulent it supposedly reflected sunlight into the sea for miles. Because nothing says reverence like confusing a passing sailor. Mainstream historians agree Hera's cult thrived in Argos well before Homer was stitching together epics. But fringe accounts suggest her followers held eyewitness festivals, where participants wore cloaks covered in drawn or sewn-on eyes, a fashion-forward nod to Argus, or early wearable security systems. Historians still argue whether these rituals were rooted in genuine devotion or simply theatrical intimidation. After all, it's harder to lie when 100 eyeballs are staring you down. You step into one of these imagined processions, invisible but present. Bells tinkle from bronze anklets, and the centimeter thickens the air. Someone offers a fig cake wrapped in bay leaves. You take it. Of course you do. It's surprisingly dense, like all mythical pastries, but pleasantly sweet. A goat nearby eyes you judgmentally, because apparently that's their thing. Inside the temple, you find statues of Hera seated regally, peacocks curling around the base like stone vines. One statue even features Hera holding a scepter with an actual peacock feather carved at the top, as if to say, "Yes, I run the show. No, I don't miss a thing." Honestly, it's giving CO energy. Quirky aside, some say peacocks weren't even native to Greece during Hera's earliest worship period. They may have been imported from Persia or India, which means Hera, ever the trendsetter, might have popularized exotic birds before it was cool. Take that Renaissance falconry. The thing is, Hera's association with the peacock didn't stop at feathers and festivals. Ancient women, particularly those trying to boost fertility or maintain fidelity in their marriages, would wear peacock amulets. Tiny charms meant to channel the goddess's protective, slightly judgy energy. And who wouldn't want that kind of backup in a world where gods keep turning into bulls and swans to crash your honeymoon? You pause near a wall fresco where a mortal woman gazes at a painted peacock. Her hand is on her heart, her eyes wide in awe or maybe dread. The line between the two gets blurry when divine bird eyes are involved. Above her head is a phrase in ancient Greek you can't read, but you can guess. Something about watching, waiting, or remembering. There's something ironic, isn't there? That Hera, often remembered as jealous, vindictive, stormy, chooses the eye-laden bird not to intimidate, but to mourn. Her symbol isn't a thunderbolt, or a sword, or a lion's roar. It's memory in plumage form. All-seeing, all-knowing, but also just there, present, a feathered ghost story. As you continue through the temple, shadows lengthen, torches flicker, casting golden spirals across the ceiling. You hear a soft rustle behind you, not footsteps, not wind, but the quiet settling of myth into history. That's how these stories survive. Through repetition, through rituals, through symbols that outlive the gods themselves. And Hera, love her or fear her, understands that. She's not just a goddess. She's a strategist, a mother, a widow, a bureaucrat of Olympus filing grievances like a pro. But most of all, she's a curator of stories, of her own, of Argus's, of Io's long bovine journey. And now, through this quiet walk you're on, of yours too, a warm breeze brushes past again. Another feather drifts. This one doesn't blink. But for a second, just a second, you feel like you're being watched in the gentlest, most eternal way. And somehow, you don't mind. A faint shimmer rides the air now, like mist woven from old incense smoke and half-remembered lullabies. Your sandals scuff against uneven marble, and each step echoes down a corridor of recollection. As you walk, the plumes of the peacock tail fade from memory, but their watchful eyes linger, tucked behind your thoughts like bookmarks in a long, slow novel. The temples fade into fields, and the fields into myth-soaked valleys. You feel the geography of ancient Greece bend beneath your feet. Not because it's inaccurate, but because memory rarely sticks to topographical rules. A laurel tree leans over the path, offering dappled shade and the subtle whisper of plot development. Because now we need to talk about what happens after Hera's peacock feathers become iconic. The peacock's reputation doesn't stop at Argus or even at Hera's temples. Over centuries, the bird struts far beyond myth and nestles into everyday symbolism. It's no longer just an emblem of all-seeing memory. It becomes a stand-in for everything regal, vain, and ever so slightly absurd. In ancient times, Greeks and Romans viewed the peacock with equal parts awe and confusion. The bird was beautiful, yes, but weirdly impractical. Its cry sounds like a door hinge on a haunted ship. Its feathers, iridescent and ornate, served no survival function unless the goal was to be spotted from space. And yet, it became a status symbol. Peacocks were kept in palace gardens, painted on pottery, and used as metaphors for luxury and divine arrogance. Mainstream fact? Peacocks became associated with immortality in Roman times. Why? Because their flesh was believed not to decay after death. Yep, that's right. Ancient writers claim that peacock meat stayed fresh indefinitely, which is either a deeply reassuring funeral buffet detail or just a misunderstanding of early refrigeration. And it wasn't just Greeks and Romans. Early Christians, always on the hunt for good rebranding opportunities, borrowed the peacock too. They stripped it of its vanity connotations and adopted it as a symbol of resurrection and eternal life, which is a pretty big plot twist for a bird whose original myth included a casual divine murder and a feather-based tribute. Historians still argue whether this transition from Greek symbol to Christian iconography was intentional or more like a mythological recycling bin. Some scholars suggest early believers simply saw a pretty bird and said, "Yeah, that seems holy." Others think it was a calculated attempt to co-opt existing pagan symbols for smoother cultural absorption. You know, branding. Even in antiquity, Everything's about the aesthetic. As for Hera, she's watching all this unfold from Olympus, or from a backstage lounge of divine archetypes, sipping ambrosia and pretending not to care, but you know she sees it. Every time a peacock appears on a coin or in a fresco, or wandering a noble's garden in the Renaissance, it's a callback to her. Even when she's not named, she's there, whispered into every eye on every feather. You walk now through a quiet grove. Olive trees line your path like sleepy sentinels, and the grass swishes softly around your ankles. You spot a stone bench, the kind that looks like it's been waiting for 1,000 years for someone with a story to tell. So you sit. The air is cool but not cold, just crisp enough to wake up your thoughts without startling them. On your lap, a scroll appears, because in dreams and myths, props show up on cue. The parchment is delicate, aged like the edges of a well-loved recipe. On it, peacock feathers drawn in painstaking detail, with notes in the margins. You can't read the handwriting, but you know it's someone's interpretation of the myth. Not the truth, but a version, a way of remembering. You lean back, and above you, a real peacock struts along a branch. How it got there, you don't ask. Mythical birds apparently have excellent climbing skills. It preens, tail closed, head tilted, watching you as though deciding whether you're worthy of one full plume fanfare. Instead, it lets out a low screech. Not elegant, not poetic, just loud. The kind of noise that reminds you no symbol is perfect, and even sacred birds have off days. Quirky detail. In medieval bestiaries, peacocks were believed to be so proud of their own appearance that they would scream every time they looked down and saw their ugly feet, which, to be fair, is a level of body image honesty most influencers wouldn't dare attempt. You laugh softly, the sound caught by olive branches and folded into the breeze. The peacock rustles, unimpressed. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell chimes once, either a call to prayer or a divine snooze button. The wind picks up and carries with it voices, not loud, not distinct, just whispers of myths being retold. A chorus of storytellers, scribes, school children, and sleepless dreamers, all keeping the stories alive in their own way. Some get details wrong. Others exaggerate. One guy insists Hera turned into a peacock herself at some point. She didn't. But it doesn't matter. The myth lives on, even through confusion and embellishment, because the peacock isn't just Hera's symbol anymore. It's yours now, too, part of your inner menagerie of dream imagery. Every iridescent feather a reminder that some things are beautiful and absurd and entirely too dramatic. And that's okay. That's the point. You stand, the bench fading behind you, and the grove opens into a winding road ahead. More stories await, more symbols to reinterpret. But the eyes of Argus go with you. On your shoulder, your sleeve, the edges of your imagination. Watching, remembering. The road ahead isn't straight, and it isn't paved. It's the kind of path that leads you deeper into myth and forgetfulness, one twist at a time. Your footsteps are softer now, quieter, as if the earth itself has grown accustomed to the weight of your journey. The trees around you sway gently, their leaves a soft whispering chorus, and the shadows lengthen as the sun sinks lower, just out of sight. It feels like the world is settling into a slow, deliberate rhythm, a lullaby in motion. As you continue walking, you realize that the stretch of the road is different. It's familiar, yet new, like a scene from an old painting that you've never really noticed before, despite having seen it 100 times. The air smells of figs and myrrh, of something ancient yet alive. It's like you're drifting between the now and the long ago, where time doesn't tick forward so much as folding on itself. This is a part of the story where we can start to reflect, not on Hera or Argus, but on the legacy of their tale. For all the feathers and eyes, the symbols and metaphors, the peacock's mythology is less about the bird and more about what the bird represents. Yes, it's a creature of spectacle, its feathers a symbol of divine arrogance, but it's also a symbol of something deeper, something more human. Peacocks have always had an air of the absurd. Even in their mythic form, they were absurd creatures. The giant eyes were exaggerated, blown-up symbols of vanity, but their absurdity made them fascinating. And isn't that the magic of myths? They can turn something small, like a bird's tail, into a story that stretches across centuries, growing more and more complex as it moves through the hands of storytellers and interpreters. That's where the peacock becomes something we can all connect with, something we can all laugh at and, at times, see reflected in ourselves. The thing about stories like these, though, is that they don't stop at just one interpretation. Myths are elastic. They stretch to fit the culture and the era in which they're being told. And so it is with Hera's peacock. For ancient Greeks, it was a powerful symbol of divine authority, an emblem of a queen who could command even the heavens. But for the Romans, it became something else entirely. In their world, the peacock transformed into a symbol of immortality, of unchanging beauty, a creature that doesn't decay because it's too good to age. Even later, during the Christian era, the peacock was rebranded yet again. This time, it wasn't about power or vanity. It became a symbol of resurrection and eternal life, an emblem of hope that was both beautiful and slightly tragic, much like the very story it came from. Historians still argue whether this shift in symbolism was intentional or the result of early Christians attempting to appropriate pagan symbols to make their message more palatable to the masses. Was it a clever marketing strategy, or was it a deeply spiritual transformation of a once vain creature into something divine? This ambiguity of meaning, the ever-shifting symbolism, is part of what makes a peacock so enduring in our collective consciousness. Even today, we see its feathers on everything from fashion designs to logos, reminders of something both magnificent and slightly ridiculous. And yet, despite its evolution through the ages, one thing remains constant. The peacock still symbolizes the idea of beauty, both admired and feared. A soft breeze stirs the air again, and you can't help but feel that you come full circle. What started as a simple myth about a goddess's pet bird has become something far larger. A tale that spans across centuries and cultures, a symbol that touches everything from religion to art to the very notion of beauty. You stop for a moment, closing your eyes, listening to the wind as it picks up again, carrying the scent of something fresh. A reminder that myths are never really finished. They linger in the air, in the corners of our minds, in the rustling of leaves and the quiet movement of animals. And so it is with Hera's peacock. It may have started as a simple myth in the hands of the ancient Greeks, but like all great stories, it evolved, it bloomed, it lived on, not just as a tale of vengeance or a divine punishment, but as a symbol that reflects the complexities of the human condition. Beauty, pride, vanity, immortality. The peacock's eyes, scattered across the world like so many fragments of a once whole story, continue to watch us. They continue to remember whether we notice them or not. As you walk onward, the peacock's tail is no longer behind you, but you can feel its eyes in the very fabric of the world around you, in the soft flutter of wings overhead, in the glimmer of light filtering through the trees, in the way stories, like the peacock's feathers, keep finding new ways to be retold, reimagined, and reborn. Historians still argue whether Hera's peacock was always meant to be more than just a bird. Maybe it was meant to be a lesson on the dangers of vanity. Or maybe it was simply a bird with an absurdly beautiful tail. Its eyes a reminder that some things are meant to be admired, perhaps too much. But in the end, you realize that the meaning of the myth doesn't really matter. It's the way the myth lives on that counts. The way it continues to be told, reshaped, and woven into the fabric of our own lives, just as a peacock continues to spread its wings, to gaze at the world, to watch. Always watching. The journey continues quieter now, but still unfolding before you, like a river that doesn't stop flowing. Even when you think it's at its end, you can feel the weight of the world in your footsteps, or maybe it's the weight of the myth itself, as it trails behind you. But that's the thing about stories. They never really go away. Even when you think you've left them behind, they're there, waiting, gently tugging at the edges of your mind. And it's this journey through time, through myth, that brings you to an inevitable question. What is it that keeps us so fascinated by these stories? Sure, the peacock's eyes were a divine embellishment, a symbol of grandeur and beauty. But what do they really signify? If you look a little deeper, you might start to wonder if it's not just a bird that captivates us, but the whole cycle of transformation that myths encourage. We all know that myths are designed to explain the unexplainable. They're born from a world where the line between the divine and the mundane was often blurry, where gods and mortals lived alongside each other, their fates intertwined in ways we could hardly imagine. But here's the catch. In a world that's increasingly filled with logic and reason, where we can map every inch of the earth and measure the stars in a way the ancients never could, we still find ourselves drawn to these ancient stories. Why? Historians still argue whether this attachment to mythology is simply a human need for meaning or whether it's a cultural inheritance that's been passed down over millennia. Do we still seek myths because they help explain the complexities of life, or is it just that we're wired to love a good story, no matter how fantastical? Perhaps it's a bit of both, a blending of our need for clarity and our inherent desire for wonder. You stop for a moment, allowing the stillness of the scene to soak into your bones. The quiet whispers of trees and the soft rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush remind you that the story of the peacock is one thread in a much larger tapestry. It's a story about pride and loss, about a goddess who turns a bird into an emblem of divine beauty, but also a story about us, the humans who continue to tell it, shape it, and reinterpret it in every age. Just consider the way the peacock's eyes continue to be seen, century after century, in new contexts. Its feathers, once a divine display, have also been turned into motifs for beauty, for vanity, for immortality, and even for resurrection. It's a motif that keeps being reborn, like the myth itself, each time taking on new meanings, new layers. Even in the modern day, we still see peacock feathers as symbols of wealth and power. In certain circles, a peacock's feather is a statement of sophistication, something to be flaunted, much like the gods of old once did. That's where the peacock's tail becomes more than just a myth about a bird. It becomes a metaphor. The eyes in its tail aren't just a show. They are a reminder of how we perceive the world around us. The more eyes there are, the more we see. But perhaps the more we see, the more we fear. The peacock's eyes serve as a symbol not only of beauty and power, but the way power itself can become overwhelming. The more eyes that are watching, the more you feel you're under scrutiny. And yet, it's hard not to find some sort of beauty in that. In the presence of so many eyes, there's a strange intimacy, a sense of being watched, seen, understood in a way that's beyond the ordinary. It's like the way people sometimes enjoy being lost in a crowd, surrounded, but somehow still invisible. The peacock, with its eyes scattered across the feathers, offers that same paradox. It's beautiful because it's so closely observed, but also intimidating because it's so difficult to escape its gaze. You keep walking, and your mind begins to drift back to the story of Hera and Argus. You think about the way Argus was cursed with eyes that never closed, constantly vigilant, ever watching. That wasn't just a punishment. It was a way of saying, you're always being watched. You're never free. And Hera, in her jealousy and rage, did something far more than punish her rival. She created a symbol of eternal vigilance, one that will be passed down through the ages, a symbol of both power and constraint. Historians still argue whether Hera's decision to transform Argus's eyes into a peacock's tail was a deliberate act of beauty or an act of cruel punishment. Was it an aesthetic choice? Or was it a reminder of the consequences of unchecked jealousy? Maybe it was both. Maybe myths are so powerful because they don't give us simple answers. Maybe their complexity, their contradictions, their shifting meanings are what keep them alive. At this point in your journey, you realize that Hera's peacock is more than just a creature. It's a story. No, it's a story of how beauty, power, and vanity are forever intertwined. It's a tale of how divine forces shape our understanding of what it means to be human, and how, even in the smallest of things, there's always more than meets the eye. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. No matter how much we learn, no matter how much we uncover, the stories will always have layers. There will always be more to see, more eyes to discover, whether it's the peacock watching us or the myths themselves, keeping their secrets just out of reach, teasing us with their beauty, their complexity, and their endless potential for reinterpretation. The wind picks up again, and you feel the familiar pull of the journey ahead. The peacock may be behind you now, but its eyes are everywhere, watching, waiting, reminding you that the story is never truly finished. The road winds gently, the horizon stretching endlessly before you, but it feels like you're not moving at all, just suspended in a timeless place, floating between the past and the present. Your mind meanders back, tracing the lines of Hera's story once again, and the image of the peacock with its eye-dotted tail becomes almost hypnotic. Each eye, each feather, seems to tell its own little tale, one that's always shifting, as myths often do. They never stay fixed in time. They breathe with the pulse of the people who tell them. Historians still argue whether the peacock's symbolism, its eyes, was originally tied to concepts of immortality, or whether it was just the Greeks trying to make sense of Hera's eccentric choice of a companion. In fact, the notion of immortality is key here. In a world where the gods could die or transform at any moment, the permanence of the peacock's tail is almost a contradiction to the volatility of the divine. The eyes never close, never blink. They stand as a symbol of constant awareness. But perhaps it's also a symbol of something more, the immortal nature of stories themselves. Just like Hera's peacock, the myths keep watching, keep appearing in our lives, never truly fading. As your footsteps echo softly on the path, you reflect on the idea of immortality in myths. Hera didn't just create a beautiful creature. When she transformed Argus's body, she immortalized a moment, a story. That tale, with all its eyes, has lived on far beyond the time of Argus and Hera, continuing to be a symbol of vigilance, of jealousy, and of beauty. In fact, it still lingers in modern art, literature, and even fashion. How many times have you seen a peacock feather woven into something designed to catch your eye, to symbolize luxury or mystery? The eye motif from that ancient myth endures in every glance we cast at these symbols, reminding us that myths never truly leave us. It's fascinating to think that a single act, Hera's punishment or perhaps her gift, depending on your view, could spawn an entire cultural legacy. How many times have you seen a peacock in art, in literature, or even in advertisements, reminding you of a myth you may not even remember fully? In a way, that's the true power of myths. They lodge themselves deep in the collective unconscious and keep resurfacing when we least expect it. Whether we understand the full way of their meaning or not, the images and symbols continue to influence our thoughts, our decisions, and even our aesthetics. Historians still argue whether myths evolve because we need them to, because we want to find answers to life's complex questions, or whether we simply love the comfort of their familiar patterns. Maybe it's both. Maybe humans can't resist the allure of an eternal narrative, the kind that keeps reshaping itself through generations, adapting to the cultural climate, yet remaining rooted in something ancient and unchangeable. There's a kind of comfort in that, don't you think? Knowing that no matter how much the world changes, some stories will always find their way back to you, to whisper their truths in new ways. And there's something comforting, too, about the idea that we're all part of that story. After all, you're part of this narrative now, just by listening. Maybe, in some way, you're helping to keep these myths alive, too. Each retelling breathes new life into them, and every time we engage with them, whether consciously or not, we're adding a new layer, a new interpretation. But as comforting as that thought may be, there's something unsettling about it, too. The stories never quite belong to any one person. They are shared and reshaped across time, picked up by each new generation to mold and twist however it sees fit. You can never truly own them. The myths, like the peacock's tail, are endlessly mutable, as much a part of the world around you as they are a part of you. It's a strange paradox. The stories are both ours and not ours, woven into the very fabric of the world in a way that's beyond our understanding. And now, you begin to feel the weight of that paradox, the realization that you can't escape these myths, not really. Like the peacock's eyes, they're always there, always watching, always waiting for the right moment to open. They blink in and out of history, appearing when you least expect them, carrying with them the wisdom of ages. And perhaps that's what makes Hera's peacock so endlessly fascinating. It's not just a bird, not just a divine creature with a showy tail. It's a symbol of something larger, something far more universal. The endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The feathers, the eyes, they all serve as reminders that nothing stays the same forever. Change is inevitable, but there's a strange kind of immortality in the stories we tell, in the myths that shape our world. As you stand there, contemplating the journey ahead, you can almost hear the peacock's call in the distance, faint but unmistakable. It's a reminder that the story is never truly over. The eyes keep opening, the feathers keep shimmering and the myths continue to unfold. And you? Well, you're just another person passing through this timeless landscape, carrying the stories with you, whether you realize it or not.